Okay, today we're going to do that from Chesed Mad Aleph. We're speaking about the sugya of Hoyel. Hoyel means if theoretically I could do something in a mutadika way, does that help me even if I don't do it practically in that way? We brought down a brisa speaking about that a person could do one thing, one action, and be chayav on 6 different things. We went through that yesterday, and then we finished off with the discussion if muksa is deiraisa or not. So Rabbi said that muksa is deiraisa. We asked from that brisa, we asked the question of Rabbi. One of the isurim doesn't fit according to Rabbi because hoyel will make it mutter. And we said Rabbi answered, take off that isur and put back muksa instead. So we asked the Rabbi, you tell me that muksa is deiraisa? So Rabbi said the din of muksa is deiraisa. So now we're going to ask in this discussion if muksa deiraisa or not. We're asking a question of Rabbi. We brought down on the top of the Pesachim Mad Aleph. We brought down a brisa speaking about what karbanos you could bring on the Beis Hamikdash. One of the dinim were that the dinim, the liquid you bring for the wine, meaning for the nisach hayayin, the wine that you bring for the Beis Hamikdash has to be mutter. It has to be something which is mutter. It can't be something which is asur. And the brisa specifies that we don't bring wine from Tev. So now we're going to start with Chesed Mad Aleph all the way at the top. Yochel leyavi. Yochel leyavi is 4 lines on the top. Says the Brisa, Yochel leyavi and muksa. Maybe I would say that you cannot bring wine from muksa. I mean, let's say if you have wine that's muksa, for example, let's say the wine was out of town on Erev Shabbos when Shabbos came in, and therefore now it's muksa. And someone on Yom Tov, obviously on Shabbos, it's also because he carried it. But on Yom Tov, someone brought the wine. So then the wine is, on Shabbos also. But so he brought the wine onto the Beis Hamikdash. So now this wine is muksa. So maybe I can't use it. It's not counted as mutter. It's something which is asur. So the Brisa says that you're able, I would have think you couldn't use that wine. I'm going to teach you that you could use that wine. Because I can make a kavachem and say like this. Ma tavel miyuchad sheisur gufei garim lei afkal sheisur gufei garim lei. We said inside the brisa, what's asur? What's asur? The wine to bring the wine that's asur to bring on the mizbeach is wine which is tevel. Why did the brisa specify tevel dafka? Because the brisa is saying that any isur, the only thing which is asur to bring on this mizbeach is something which is asur like tevel. What's something which is asur like tevel? Tevel, the isur of tevel is gufei garam. What does it mean gufei garam? It's also because its body, meaning it's the object is also the object. It was grown without taking term from. So right now, why is it also? It's also because the item is also, not because a side reason. So too, anything which is also because that item is also, that's what you cannot bring wine in this beach. Meaning anything which is also because the object is also, for example, arla or tevel, etc. But you have some muksa, which excludes something which is wine, which is muksa. Why? Because wine, which is muksa, isn't essentially asur. Wine, which is muksa, shein isur gufei garim lei. The reason why it's asur is not because the item is asur. Wine is a mutadika item, and if you would drink this wine on Friday, or you would bring this wine closer to town on Friday, we mutter. And the reason why it's asur is not because itself is asur. The item is asur. It's asur because a side din is making asur, which in our case is din of muksa, and the side din is making asur, that's not counted as something which is asur from mizbeach, and therefore the price difference is off. That if you bring wine muksa, take a wine on mizbeach, you would be able to, your carbon be kosher. So now the first is asking Rabbi again. All this is one long question on Rabbi, which Rabbi says the din of muksa is the deiraisa, and you get malchus for it. If you're telling, like we said, finished off yesterday, that the isur of muksa is deiraisa, and therefore you get malchus for it. Mali isur gufei mali davar acher. Why does the brisa make a differentiation between something which is asur because of the item is asur, like tevel, as opposed to muksa, which is asur because for a different reason? If it's a din deiraisa, muksa is a din deiraisa, why do I care why it's asur? As long as I know that it's a din deiraisa, that's asur. So once something is asur deiraisa, I cannot bring it on the mizbeach. It's not mutter. If you would tell me that the wine is mutter, that muksa is only midrabanan, So I can understand why the Bryce is making differentiation between Adi Yisurim and Muksa. Because Adi Yisurim are Deiraisa, Muksa is the Rabban. If you tell me Muksa Deiraisa, why is the Bryce making differentiation between Adi Yisurim and Muksa? Everything which is Asa Deiraisa, it cannot be brought in the Mizbech. It's not counted as a Mutter L'cha. It's not counted as Mutter. It's Asa. Right? Then another question is, Ha'atu Da'amna, you yourself said, Rabbi, who says that Muksa, who wanted to answer before and said that you get Malchus from Muksa, you yourself said Chiluk Malachis l'Shabbos, vein Chiluk Malachis li'Yamtiv. That the idea of Chiluk Malachis, meaning if a person does a whole bunch of different Malachis, like we had the case, the price that we brought before, a person, he cooked on Yom Tiv, and he plowed on Yom Tiv, and he cut on Yom Tiv. So if a person does a whole bunch of different Malachis, so Rabbi says if he did a whole bunch of different Malachis on Shabbos, meaning in the same knowledge and without knowing in between, in one hell, he did a whole bunch of different malachas on Shabbos, so he's chayiv for each one. Because we learn from different psukim that regarding Shabbos, each malach is separate. And since each malach is separate, even if you did them in one hell, one knowledge, just a chayiv for each one. But the ain chiluk malachas the Yom Tov, but Rabbi's machadesh that regarding Yom Tov, there's no chiluk malachas when regarding Yom Tov. If you do a whole bunch of different malachas, one after one, right after each other, you only chayiv one carbon, not chayiv two. So the question of Rabbi is, if regarding malachas, you're not chayiv for each malacha, you only chayiv for one thing. Why does the Baisa say that if you cook the Baisa said if you cook the gid hanosh on Yom Tov, then you get a mal, you get. If you cook the Gidanash on Yom Tov, like we said, we said yesterday, that if you do one action, which includes a whole bunch of different malachas, you chayiv 6 chatais. How can it be a chayiv 6 chatais? Yeah, sorry, how can it be a chayiv 6 times malchus, 6 yisurim? Right, the Bryce is speaking about Yom Tov, and regarding Yom Tov, why you regarding Yom Tov, we brought a case of someone who cooks on Yom Tov and he uses wood, which is muksa, so he gets malchus for using muksa, and he also gets malchus for cooking a Yom Tov. Question is, why does he get malchus for cooking a Yom Tov and for muksa? If according to Rabbi on Yom Tov, we do not arm machalak between two different malachas. You only chayiv one malchus. So we have two questions on Rabbi. Number one, according to Rabbi, how can you say muksa is deiraisa? We have a brayso that says that muksa is different. You could bring wine from muksa on the mizbeach. If muksa is deiraisa, how can you bring wine which is muksa on the mizbeach? Another question is, how can you say Rabbi that he's chayiv twice malchus, one for cooking on Yom Tov, something which you're not allowed to cook, and one for muksa? You yourself say that regarding Yom Tov, we do not make a differentiation between two malachas, and you only chayiv one time malchus if you do two malachas on Yom Tov. Answers the Gemara, so therefore I'm going to have to answer you. That which Rabbi said you chayiv 6 times malchus didn't mean you chayiv for cooking on Yom Tov. It meant a different issur. It meant that you cook the wood you cook your gidanashe with with wood from an Avodah Zarah tree. Since you cook it with wood from an Avodah Zarah tree, so you get malchus not because you cooked on Yom Tov, because cooking on Yom Tov is you already get malchus for a muksa. You already get malchus. The issur you get, the issur of malchus you're getting is not because of your lighting a fire on Yom Tov. It's because you're using wood from a Asherah tree. Since you're using wood from a Asherah tree, which is Avodah Zarah, so you're having Hanoah from Avodah Zarah, which is Asr. And V'azhara mi'achan, Torah said, it says from Avodah Zarah you can't have any benefit. Since it says from Avodah Zarah you can't have any benefit, you are having direct benefit from the Avodah Zarah tree, and therefore you get malchus. So again, we asked the question on Rabbi from muksa and from cooking a Yom Tov. So he says that regarding cooking a Yom Tov, this is different. You don't get malchus cooking a Yom Tov. These when you get malchus over here is for using wood from a Asherah tree. The son of Rabbi told Abai, if so, if Taka, you're using wood from a Asherah tree from Avodah Zarah, so why do you only get once malchus for using Avodah Zarah? V'nulkinam, you should get malchus a second time. It says regarding Avodah Zarah, it's one issur of having benefit from Avodah Zarah, and there's another issur of bringing Avodah Zarah into your house. And since you're bringing your Avodah Zarah into your house, so therefore not only are you having benefit, not only you bring it to the house, you're having benefit, you should get malchus twice. Why does the Brisa say that you only get malchus once Avodah Zarah? Again, the Brisa you just said do 6 times. We have to figure out what are those things that the Brisa means. So we tried to say before it means muksa and it means cooking, and we said that doesn't make sense. So now we're trying to say that it means cooking a nasha with on Yom Tif with wood from Rashi from Avodah Zarah tree. And the Gemara asks, how can you say that the Issa means cooking from Avodah Zarah tree with Avodah Zarah wood? It's Avodah Zarah wood you get malchus 7 times, not 6 times, because for Avodah Zarah you get malchus twice. So answers the Gemara, the last answer, take off Avodah, meaning take off of the list of malchus the Issa of Avodah, the Issa of lighting a fire on Yom Tif, and put instead of that the Issa of using wood of Hekdesh, meaning you use the wood you use to cook your Gidanasha wasn't wood which is from a shady tree, it was wood from Hekdesh, wood from the Beis HaMikdash. And regarding wood from the Beis HaMikdash, there's a lav, it says in the pasuk that you can only burn the wood of a Avodah Zarah tree. But regarding burning wood from Beis HaMikdash, you cannot burn the wood of Beis HaMikdash unless it's on the Mizbeach. But if you're burning the wood of Beis HaMikdash, you get malchus. And therefore, that's how the Brisa Maskana, the Brisa is that you get malchus 6 times for eating the Gedanasha, for eating milk and meat, and for cooking milk and meat, and for cooking on Yom Tif. And the last time you get malchus is for the wood you were using. The problem with the wood you were using was wood from Hekdesh, and you cannot burn wood from Hekdesh, and that's why you get malchus for that. So that's Maskana and the Gemara. So now we're going back to the idea of Hoyel. Yeah, we got a bit carried away with dinner of Muksa and the Brisa, but now we're going back to the dinner of Hoyel. We had a machlekes of Chisda and Rabbi, whether we say Hoyel or we do not say Hoyel. So that's the machlekes we had regarding Rav Chisda and Rabbi. Just remember, the machlekes was speaking about if someone cooks on Yom Tif. The case was if someone cooks a big cake or whatever it is on Yom Tif, right before Yom Tif is about to come out. The thing is, you cannot cook on Yom Tif unless you're going to eat that food on Yom Tif. If you cannot cook on Yom Tif for after Yom Tif, that's Issa Deiraisa. The problem is this person did cook. So does he get malchus or does he not get malchus? So Rav Chisda says he does get malchus. Rabbi says he doesn't get malchus. Why does he not get malchus? Because he doesn't get malchus. Like you say Hoyel. What does Hoyel mean? If he would invite, theoretically, if he would invite all his neighbors, and they would eat in this cake on Yom Tif. So then it would be Magala that his action of cooking on Yom Tif wasn't a problem because the food is being eaten on Yom Tif. That's all a theoretical thing. Rabbi says that even though it's only a theoretical thing, but theoretical helps for practical. And that's why for right now, even though theoretically, if he didn't invite, only if theoretically invite all his neighbors, but now that helps for him now to make that his action isn't a asidic action. So that was machlekes of Rav Chisda and Rabbi. Now that was one machlekes. There's another machlekes between we had in the Mishnah of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua. Just to recap, we learned it quite a while ago. We had the case in the Mishnah of if you're going to have bread on Pesach. How do we get into this whole discussion? We brought down the Mishnah brought down a plot ago, the Mishnah brought down a machlekes, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua, always machlekes. Rabbi Elazar says that if you have bread, if you have a dough on Pesach, and the dough is tummy, okay? So the dough became tummy before you took challah. So you have a whole big dough, huge pile of dough, and it became tummy. The problem is I didn't take challah from it. And since I didn't take challah from it, what am I supposed to do with this dough? What's the problem? The problem is like this. The challah that I'm going to take from this dough is a challah tmeah. So therefore, it has to be burnt. Problem is, I can't. But the rest of the dough I could eat because there's no problem eating dough which is tummy. Problem is the challah that I'm going to take from this dough is going to be tummy, and if it's tummy, it has to be burnt. I can't burn it on Yom Tif because you cannot burn things on Yom Tif which are not for Yom Tif itself. But we're speaking about Pesach, and the problem is if I'm going to separate dough for challah and leave it to the end of the Yom Tif, so it's going to become chametz. So what am I supposed to do? So we had a few options. Well, as I said, that you should cook the whole dough before you take challah. I mean, you do not separate challah from it. Just bake the whole dough. After you bake the whole dough, it's already baked. I could take challah after I'm baking. After I bake the dough, then I could take challah from it. As opposed to Rabbi Yeshua said that it's also to bake the whole dough. And what should you do? You should take challah from it before And if it becomes chametz, then it's not your problem. We're going to see soon, like we learned before already, that Rabbi Shua says that you're not over on the chametz. So the machlekes is whether you could bake the dough before taking challah, or you cannot bake the dough. Rabbi Elazar says you could bake the dough and then take challah. Rabbi Shua says you cannot bake the dough and then take challah. You have to take challah before you bake it. So the Amar Rabbi says that this machlekes of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shua, whether to bake the dough before I take challah or not, is connected to the machlekes of Rabbi Chisda and Abba, whether we say the idea of hoil or we don't say hoil. Why? The Rabbi Elazar sabar amninon hoil. Rabbi Elazar, the same Rabbi Elazar, the reason why Rabbi Elazar says to bake the dough and then take challah from it, and there's no problem with that, is because he says the idea of hoil. What is the din of hoil? He says that it's mutter to bake the dough on Yom Tov, even though when you're going to take, even though eventually you're going to take one of the, you're going to take off a piece of this dough. It's even though when you're baking the whole dough for Yom Tov, a portion of this dough is being baked not for Yom Tov because it's challah. So you're cooking bread that's not groy for Yom Tov. But I say hoil. What does it mean hoil? I could have a theoretical way that I could cook this challah on Yom Tov. How? Since I could be not mafresh, since I don't have to take a full piece of dough for challah, what I could do is I could take a small piece from each. Let's say I could divide my challah into loaves and take off a small piece from each loaf for challah, and that would be much to do on Yom Tov. Well, so there's two ways. Just introduction. There's two ways to take challah. Either I could take challah, which we usually do now. Is we take challah, we have a whole big piece of dough, and we take challah for a bit for the whole huge pile of dough. That's one way of taking challah. Another way of taking challah is that, so when you take challah, you take off one piece, and that's matched to the rest of the dough. Another way of taking challah is that I could divide the challah into loaves, different loaves. And instead of taking one big chunk to matter all the loaves, I take off a small piece from each loaf of bread. So let's say I take 10 and make 10 pieces of bread. So I'm going to take off a small piece from each loaf of bread. What's an afkamina? What's the difference? The difference is like this. If I'm going to take challah, if I have a big chunk of dough and I put in the oven, so I put in the oven without taking challah from it yet. So when I'm baking this challah, even though I didn't take challah from it yet, but for sure a certain piece of this challah is going to be, a piece of this dough is going to be challah, and therefore it would be also for me to cook on Yom Tov. Let's say I have a big chunk of dough, right? I didn't take any challah from it yet. If I'm going to put it in the oven, Rabbi Elazar said you're able to take this piece of dough and put it in the oven, and then take challah from it afterwards. The question is, how can you take challah from it afterwards? When you're putting it in the oven, how can you bake it? A piece of this dough is for sure going to be challah. Since a piece of this dough for sure going to be challah, so then you're baking challah on Yom Tov, and that you can't do. So how does it let you do that? So the answer is, Rabbi Elazar holds in the musig of the idea of hoil. What does hoil mean? If I would take challah the other way, how can I take the challah the other way? Meaning I wouldn't take challah from a big chunk of dough. There's another way of taking challah by dividing the dough into loaves of bread, forming them into challahs, and then taking a piece of dough from each one, and that would be mutter. So since that would be mutter for me to do it, even though right now I didn't divide it each one, so that would be mutter for me to bake it, because in order to take challah from each dough, I have to from each in order to take challah to take challah from my piece of dough, I have to first divide it into challahs. So therefore, that would be mutter for me to bake in a Yom Tov. So why can I take challah from the big chunk of dough? So the answer would be that Rabbi Elazar could say the idea of hoil. Since there's another way of taking challah that's mutter, and even though you didn't do the other way, that's mutter to cook on Yom Tov. But since I said the idea of hoil, that theoretically you could have done the other way, that helps you now. Therefore, Rabbi Elazar says you could cook the whole challah, bake the whole challah, and then take challah from it, bake the whole dough, and then take the challah from it after. That would be Rabbi Elazar's opinion. Rabbi Shua would say, and the reason why Rabbi Shua says that you cannot bake challah, you cannot bake the dough, you have to take challah from it before. Because Rabbi Shua would hold, we don't say that idea of hoil. And therefore, as long even it doesn't help me that theoretically I could bake the dough without taking challah. It doesn't help. As long as you're taking challah from the big chunk of dough, you cannot stick this chunk of dough into the oven, because that's going to make you bake on Yom Tov challah, which is awesome. So what do you have to do? You have to take challah before that which becomes chametz. We're going to see soon how, and we learned already about it, how Rabbi Shua deals with that. So we're trying to connect two different machlekes. We're trying to connect the machlekes of Rishon and Rabbi Eliezer, whether to bake the dough before taking challah or bake the dough after taking challah, together with the machlekes of Rav Chisda and Rabbi, whether we say hoyel or we do not say hoyel. So Amar Papa says, why are you connecting both machlekes? And I could differentiate between both machlekes. I can say it like this: Ad kan lekam Rabbi Eliezer hasam damnin on hoyel ela de beinon beida do ka'ayel tanura kol chada v'chada chazir le'lididei. I could say the reason why Rabbi Eliezer would say hoyel, the reason why Rabbi Eliezer would say that you're able to bake the challah before bake the dough before taking the challah is because when I put this chunk of dough into the oven, when I put the piece of dough into the oven, each challah is mutter to bake it by itself. Why? Because it could be that I'm only taking challah at the end. Yeah, again, if I divide each challah separately, let's say I have a piece of dough, a chunk of dough. So the dough is not chayiv challah yet. The dough is not chayiv challah because I could say that if I would divide each chunk of dough, if I would divide the chunk of dough into 10, so then each piece of challah would be chayiv. Each piece of dough would be chayiv challah by itself. So when I put in the oven, so kol chada v'chada chazir l'dei, each piece of challah was mutter. When I put the piece of dough into the oven, there is a way theoretically that will be mutter because each dough, if I would divide it separately, each dough would be chayiv challah by itself. But in the case of cooking from Yom Tiv, from cooking on Yom Tiv to the next day, so the piece of the food is, if I would invite my guests, so invite the whole town, so and feed them. So then for the guests that eat the food will be mutter. But for me, I already ate my food. So since I already ate my food, I'm not going to eat my food. I'm full already. So when I put this food, when I put a huge cake into the oven, I'm right into the oven right at the end of Yom Tiv, I'm full already. The only hatter is, what's the hoyel? Hoyel is if I'm going to invite all my friends, so then they're going to be able to eat the cake. But for you, you're not going to be able to eat the cake because you will be able to, but you're full. So there's no theoretically, because theoretically, you're not going to be able to eat the cake either. So maybe I could say that this Rabbi Eliezer, who says, who's matter you to put the dough in the oven, the reason why it's matter you to put the dough in the oven before taking challah is because there is a way theoretically that each challah will be mutter. That there is a way theoretically that if I would divide the dough into different pieces, each loaf of bread would be mutter to put in the oven. But in the case of cooking on Yom Tiv, it's mutter. It's not mutter for everyone. What do you mean it's not mutter? The theoretical doesn't help for everyone. Theoretically, if I invite all my guests to eat on Yom Tiv, they would be able to eat, but I'm full already. I'm not going to eat. And therefore, the theoretical doesn't help me out. It helps everyone else out. So the question really, maybe I only say theoretically helps for practical, right? If the theoretical helps for everyone. But in the case of theoretically doesn't help for everyone, it only helps for the guest. So that won't help for me. I'm going to have Shisha Breder Avidi. And I can say the other way around. Maybe the Bishua said by regarding the rule of challah on Pesach, the reason why you cannot, that only regarding dough on Pesach, you have to take challah before putting in the oven. Because we don't say the idea of theoretical Ella, the ikochada, the lechazi, the why? Because over there, the reason why we don't say theoretically you'll be able to do it is because over there's for sure one piece of dough that's going to become challah. And since it's for sure one piece of dough that's going to become challah, so then he's machmin. He says, since it's for sure one piece of dough that's going to become challah, so when you're cooking on Yom Tov, you're for sure 100% cooking a piece of dough that's awesome. But in the case of baking on Yom Tov for the weekday, the chazi miel orchin, there is a way that will be 100% mutter for the guests. So if I invite the guests, it's going to be 100% mutter for them. It will be 100% mutter. So maybe Rabbi Eliezer would agree to the case of cooking on Yom Tov. That'll be mutter. Now, we try to connect two machlekes together, and the Gemara pushes away by saying that no, don't connect them together. Because maybe over there, the Rabbi Eliezer who says hoil over there, maybe won't say hoil over here, and the Bishra that doesn't say hoil over there, maybe over here would say hoil over here. So in other words, don't connect both machlekes together. Now the Gemara finishes off with the machlekes. This connection between the machlekes of Yom Tif, if you could cook from Yom Tif to weekday, by theoretically inviting the guests, and the machlekes of Rabbi Elazar and Bishra about cooking challah on Pesach, this connection, which Rami Bachama said, they said this in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah kiblei, but Rabbi Zera the kiblei. Rabbi Yirmiyah liked the idea of connecting both machlekes together. Rabbi Zera didn't like that idea. It wasn't makabel. Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah told to Rabbi Zera, most of the kashul on the asiyah kama shnei, the my pligi. We've had this question for a long time of what is the machlekes between Rabbi Elazar and Bishra. Hashtam ruah mishmei de gavra rabba. Now we said it in the name. We finally found the answer of what is the reasoning behind the machlekes of if you could cook the bread without taking challah or not. And we have the explanation. You're not going to accept it. In other words, he's saying, why are you being stubborn and not accepting the explanations of the machlekes? So answers the Gemara. Amarle, Rabbi Yirmiyah told him back, hey, how can I accept this explanation? The Tanina, we already learned in a Braisa. Amarle, the Bishua told the Beleza, this Bishua, who says that in order to bake the bread on Yom Tif, you have to first take challah from it before. You cannot bake bread before taking challah. So he told him, according to you, and he tells Rabbi Elazar, according to you, who says that you could cook the bread and then take challah, how can you cook on Yom Tif? How can you cook the bread? If you're cooking the bread, inside this dough includes a piece which is going to be challah, and if it includes it inside a piece which is going to be challah, so you're cooking challah on Yom Tif, which is asur. And he didn't answer me. And if you're right, meaning if you're right that the reasoning of Rabbi Elazar, who says that it's mutter to cook the dough on Yom Tif, is because we say the idea of Hayel, why didn't he answer? Be sure. You should tell him, no, I have an answer for you. Time of the day, the reason why I let you cook, to cook the dough and then take challah, even though when you're cooking the dough, it includes a piece of challah and it's also to cook challah Yom Tif. It's time of the day. The reason why I say it's mutter is mishum hayel, because I say the svar of hayel. I would say that since there is a way of separating challah from each loaf of bread by itself. So therefore, that would be mutter. And if that would be mutter, so I say that day of hayel. Why wouldn't Yeshua have told him? What do you mean you're cooking on Yom Tif? If Elazar didn't answer him. So in other words, he's saying it's a good explanation in the machlekes, but I don't accept it, because if that's the explanation of machlekes, then the Mishnah should have said that Rabbi Elazar answered to be sure that my reason is because of hayel. Amar lei, so the answer back to Rabbi Zera, and according to your reasoning, that which we learned in the same Braisa, that Rabbi Elazar asked Rabbi Shua back. Amar lei Rabbi Elazar asked him, according to you, that says to take challah and not bake the bread. You're being over and balira by the matzah. Why? Because if you're taking the challah before you bake it, you're taking a piece of dough before you bake it, and you're leaving it hanging around to the end of Yom Tif, you're going to be over. The dough is going to become chametz, and you're going to be over and balira by the matzah. And it says in the Braisa, v'shasikle, the Bishra never answered him. He asked him a question, you're going to be over on chametz, and he never answered him. Hachanami also here. Do you want to say the lo yahadalei? That Hitaka never answered him, even though the Braisa says didn't answer him. You're telling me that Hitaka never answered him? You can't say that. How come I had that even must listen? We have a clear Mishnah that Rabbi Shua gives an explanation why you're not over on chametz, because Rabbi Shua says lo yizau chametz shemusarin alav mishum bari rabani matzah. Rabbi Shua says that you're not chayiv for chametz, which is challah. You're not chayiv for chametz, which belongs to the kohen, not to you. Ella. So what do you have? So in other words, he does have an explanation why you're not chayiv for chametz. So why in the Mishnah does it say he didn't give an explanation? Ella shasikle bebraisa mahadlev masnis. The answer to that is because in the Braisa he didn't have an answer, but in the Mishnah later on he answered him on his question. Achanami saw too the other way around. That we should be sure asked the question of Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar didn't answer. It's not because Rabbi Elazar didn't have an answer. And he didn't answer him in the Mishnah, but in a different place he answered him. In other words, he tried to slug up and say that the reasoning of you can't say the machlekes, the reasoning of the machlekes is whether we say hayel or not, because if you're going to say that, why didn't Rabbi Elazar answer him? So he proved that which Rabbi Elazar didn't answer is not because he didn't have an answer, it's because Right then he didn't answer, but he answered later on. Who do we pass like? Tanya, Rabbi says halacha kebelezer. The halacha like Rabbi says halacha like a belezer, and therefore on Pesach, if you have a big pile of dough, then you should bake the dough and then take challah from it. But Rabbi Yitzchak says halacha kebemseira. The halacha is like bemseira, that you should not bake the dough and take challah from it. First, you should take challah and then bake the dough. Says the Gemara. Now we're going to a bit of a different topic. The kamor shiur isa. How much dough can you cook on Yom Tov? Can you need on Yom Tov without being scared that the dough is going to become chametz? There's a minimal share. Chametz said you can't do pulos on Pesach, which are going to make things chametz. How much is the minimal dough you could bake on Yom Tov on Pesach without being scared it's going to become chametz? So Bishmal B'nei Yossi ben Breka Emer, and Bishmal the son of Yossi ben Breka says, "B'chitin, if you're using wheat, kabin, then 2 kav of wheat is ready enough. It's ready too big to make something chametz, and therefore you got to watch out." Regarding barley, shleishes kabim, then it's 3 kabim. So barley for wheat it's 2 kabim. For barley is 3 kabim. If Nassan says, in the name of Rabbi Lezer, the other way around. They're arguing say the other way around. That regarding wheat, then it's 3 kabim. Regarding barley, it's 2 kabim. Ask the Gemara about Tanya. We have a brisa. The brisa says Rabbi Shmuel b'nei Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka Emer b'chitin shleishes kabim u'v'seires arba kabim. How can we say over here that Rabbi Shmuel says that by wheat is 2 kav and by barley is 3 kav? We have a brisa that says that by wheat is 3 kav and by barley is 4 kav. So that's a contradiction. And so the Gemara loy kasha. There's no contradiction between the 2 brisas. Ha b'chasichasa, ha b'maliyasa. The brisa that says that for wheat is 3 kav and for barley is 4 kav is speaking about bad wheat. Bad wheat takes more wheat to make it chametz, and therefore it takes more of a share. But the first price that says that only 2 kav of wheat is already mutter, is already become chametz, is speaking of malyasa, speaking of good wheat. Good wheat can make something become chametz quicker. Amar Papa says Shmamina. From here we see the gri chite chasisasa michite malyasa tfei migra and sari chasisasa misare de malyasa. Bad wheat, the difference between good wheat and bad wheat is much bigger than the difference between good barley and bad barley. Why? Dilo Hassam, regarding wheat, we said that the difference between them, the difference between good wheat and bad wheat is 1/3. Right? We said by good wheat, we said good wheat is by good wheat is 2 kabim, can make something chametz, and by bad wheat is 3 kabim. So the difference between them is 1/3. But regarding barley, what do we say? Regarding barley, we said that 4 kav of barley by bad wheat, by good barley, 3 kav of barley is good enough to make something chametz. And regarding bad barley, it's 4 kav of barley. So the difference between them is 1/4. And therefore, we see the difference between a good wheat and bad wheat is more than the difference between bad barley and good barley and bad barley. Okay, we'll stop over here on Daf Memchesam Alf. Continue tomorrow, Memchesam Des. Have a good night.